The bride in chains. The chains clinked when they dragged her up onto the wagon bed. White dress torn and gray with dust. The sun beat down merciless, turning the air into a shimmering veil that burned the eyes. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Hard laughter, sharp as spurs, the kind men used to cover their own hunger. "Bride in white," someone shouted. "Bride in chains," another corrected, and the crowd howled louder. The auctioneer's hat brim cast a shadow across his toothless grin. He smacked the wood rail with his palm. "Who'll start the bid? Strong hands here, gents." Look at her eyes, like wildfire bottled up. The bride's chin lifted, though sweat trickled down her face. Her wrists bled where iron rubbed against skin. She said nothing. Boots shifted in the dust. Men called out numbers, more jeers than serious offers. A boy too young to grow whiskers tossed a coin in the air just to hear it jingle, shouting, "I'll pay a nickel for the chains alone." The laughter swelled. At the back of the crowd, a child's voice whispered, "Papa, why are they laughing?" The man beside him, tall and weathered, kept his gaze on the wagon. His hat brim hid most of his face, though the lines carved deep in his skin told of years beneath harsher suns than this. He didn't answer the boy. $2, barked a voice from the saloon steps. The bidder swayed, whiskey spilling down his vest, but the crowd applauded anyway. Another bid followed, then another, men raising hands with a sneer or a grin, pushing the price as though it were a game. The bride's lip trembled, only once. The laughter pounced on it like wolves on a wound. A sheriff leaned against the post, badge dull, arms crossed. His eyes never lifted from the dust at his boots. The auctioneer's voice carried above the noise. $6. Do I hear 7? The boy tugged at his father's sleeve. "Papa, why won't anyone stop it?" The rancher still did not answer. His hand rested on the boy's shoulder, steady, heavy, silent. On the wagon, the bride stumbled when a rough hand jerked her chains to turn her about. Gasps and whistles cut the air. Someone called, "Let her twirl. Bride ought to twirl on her wedding day." The auctioneer laughed and obliged, yanking her until she nearly fell. The boy flinched at the sound of the crowd. His small fingers dug into his father's coat. $8. 9. The bidding slowed. The heat pressed down like a hammer, and the laughter dulled, waiting for the hammerfall of the sale. That was when the rancher stepped forward. Dust clung to his boots as he moved, slow, deliberate, every eye turning to watch the one man no one had expected. His son followed close, clutching his hand. He stood before the wagon, shadow stretching long across the dirt. The bride's eyes met his, searching, wary. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "You bidding, old man? Or just stretching your legs?" The rancher's voice came steady, low, carrying over the silence that had settled. "My son needs you. No number, no price, just words." The crowd roared with laughter. Whiskey sloshed, hats slapped knees, spurs jingled in mock applause. "Needs her, does he?" Someone jeered. "Boy want the mama." Another hollered. "Buy him a doll, old fool." The bride did not laugh. Her breath caught sharp, as though the words had struck deeper than chains ever could. The auctioneer licked his lips, uneasy beneath the thunder of ridicule. $10, then? You paying 10 for her, rancher? The rancher's eyes never left the bride's. He reached into his coat, pulled free a worn leather pouch, and tossed it onto the wagon boards. Coins spilled across the wood, ringing out like iron on an anvil. More than 10, more than 20, enough to silence laughter for half a heartbeat. Then the jeers returned, louder than before. Paid too much, bought himself a ghost in white. Chain breaker, mama maker. The sheriff shifted but said nothing. The auctioneer bent, gathered the coins, and nodded quick. "She's yours. Take her, and may God help you." The chains were shoved into the rancher's hands. Heavy, cold, they rattled like a rattlesnake's warning. The bride stood, trembling only once before she steadied. Her eyes fixed on the boy, who stared up at her with something the crowd no longer remembered how to hold. Hope. The rancher turned without a word, guiding her through the parted crowd. Men spat, muttered, laughed again, but no hand dared touch her now. Dust rose with every step until the jeers faded behind them, swallowed by distance and wind. The boy walked between them, one small hand his father's, the other brushing against the iron chain that still clung to the bride's wrist. When they reached the edge of town, the bride whispered, the first word she'd spoken aloud since the sun rose. "Why?" The rancher kept walking, gaze fixed on the horizon where land stretched endless and red beneath the setting sun. "Because my son needs you." And with those words, the laughter of the town lingered behind them like smoke, but a different sound carried forward, the slow, steady beat of legends beginning. The rancher's quiet fire. The chains hit the table with a hard clatter. The rancher's knife flashed once in the lamplight, severing the iron links. The bride drew back, rubbing raw wrists, her breath sharp in the quiet room. The boy leaned on the doorway, eyes wide. "Papa, you cut him." The rancher slid the broken chain aside. "She won't wear him here." The bride stared at him, silent, as if waiting for the catch. She had lived long enough in darkness to mistrust sudden kindness. Outside, coyotes yipped at the rim of the valley. The ranch groaned under the night wind, its boards creaking like old bones. "Are you hungry?" the boy asked, stepping forward, offering her a crust of bread from the shelf. He smiled as though he'd known her all his short life. Her fingers trembled when she took it. "Thank you." The rancher busied himself with the stove, striking a match, feeding fire. He did not look at her again, not yet. The next morning, whispers chased him into town. Men spat tobacco as he passed, leaning on railings with smirks that cut. "Chain breaker," one muttered. "Bought himself a ghost." Another said louder. The rancher's jaw stayed firm. He loaded flour and beans into the wagon, the boy sitting tall on the seat beside him. The bride walked close, her head high, though every eye felt like a lash. When they turned to leave, a voice carried from the saloon porch. "You think you shamed us, old man? We'll take back what's ours." The rancher didn't answer. The boy's small hand slid into his. The bride kept walking. Behind them, laughter rose again, but it was thinner now, edged with anger. At the ranch, silence wrapped around the three of them. The bride swept the hearth clean. The boy followed her step for step, asking questions about everything she touched. "Were you always alone?" he asked. Her answer came slow. "Not always." She lifted her sleeve, showing the pale band where a ring once rested. "I was promised to a man. They killed him when they took me." The boy's breath caught. His gaze flicked to his father, but the rancher was outside, hammering a broken gate. She lowered her arm. "I won't be promised again." That night, she slept on a cot near the fire, the boy tucked in the loft above. The rancher sat at the table, staring at the pistol lying before him. Its metal glimmered dull under lamplight, a ghost of the life he'd buried. His hand hovered, then closed over the grip. He pulled the cylinder, oiled the chamber, tested the weight. The sound of it echoed in the cabin like thunder rolling over the plains. Up in the loft, the boy stirred. He whispered into the dark, as though to his mother's memory. "Papa's getting ready." The next day, trouble walked closer. The fence line was cut, 2 calves missing. Prince led back toward the canyon. The bride stood beside the rancher at the broken posts, her eyes narrowed. "They'll come again." He nodded once. "They will." She studied him, the way his hand rested on the revolver at his belt. "You've done this before." The rancher's eyes lifted to the horizon, where the sun bled red into dust. His answer came low, carved with memory. "Once, long ago." The boy kicked at the dirt, frowning. "Papa, I don't want them to come." His father crouched, steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "Sometimes trouble rides whether we want it or not. What matters is we stand when it does." The boy swallowed hard and nodded. At dusk, the bride carried water from the well. The rancher worked by lantern light in the barn. The boy practiced lassoing fence posts, his laughter a fragile spark in the heavy air. Hoofbeats thundered past on the ridge. Dark silhouettes lingered against the fading sky. A man's voice carried across the distance, mocking, promising. "You can't hide her, rancher. She's ours." The bride froze, water sloshing down her skirt. The boy dropped the rope, eyes wide. The rancher stepped from the barn, lantern swinging in one hand, revolver in the other. He did not fire, did not shout. He only stood, staring up at the ridge until the riders turned back into shadow. The boy whispered, "Papa, who are you really?" The rancher didn't answer. He blew out the lantern, leaving the night to speak for him. Later, inside the cabin, the bride sat by the fire, chain scars raw but healing. She looked at the boy, asleep in his blanket, then at the man across from her, silent with his revolver laid close. "You risked your life for me," she said. His gaze stayed on the flames. "Not just for you." She waited, then nodded once, as though she understood. Outside, the wind carried a faint echo of laughter from town, but here in the cabin it found no place to settle. Only the crackle of fire answered, and the slow, steady breath of a man who had sworn never to pick up his gun again, yet had already begun. And so the night held them, three souls bound together not by chains, but by a storm yet to break. The gathering storm, the rifle cracked, the bullet splitting a tin can clean off the fence post. Smoke curled from the barrel, and the bride lowered the gun with steady hands. The boy whooped from the corral, "You hit it, Mama." Her breath came quick, not from fear but from the weight of memory. She reset the rifle, cocked it again, and sighted down the length. The rancher watched from a shade of the barn door, arms folded, saying nothing. His eyes told enough. Another shot, another can spun into the dust. The echo rolled off the canyon walls, chased by silence. "They'll hear us," the bride murmured, lowering the weapon. "They already know," the rancher said. That night, the firelight painted their faces. The boy leaned close to her, listening to stories of the wagon train, of prairie skies before the raid, of the man she was meant to wed. Her voice faltered only once when she spoke his name. The rancher sat apart, sharpening a knife, steel whispering against stone. Sparks danced in the firelight. He did not look up. When the boy finally slept, she asked him across the flames, "How many men have you killed?" The knife paused. The sound of steel ceased. For a long while, only the fire spoke. "Enough," he said. The flames threw shadows that looked like ghosts on the walls. Days passed, each one wound tighter than the last. The rancher patched fences. The bride learned to ride again, her dress traded for work clothes. The boy followed them both, carrying wood, gathering water, speaking less than before. Even his laughter came thin, wary. On the third evening, smoke smudged the sky from the north ridge. A fence post lay broken, calves missing. Bootprints in the dust showed more than one man. "They're circling," the bride said. The rancher knelt, brushing his hand over the tracks. His jaw tightened. "Not circling, hunting." The boy clutched his sleeve. "Papa, will they come here?" The rancher rose, hand brushing the revolver at his side. His eyes searched the horizon as though reading something the others could not see. "Yes." The saloon in town boiled with voices. Word carried back to the ranch in broken whispers. The men who lost their property had gathered others, filling mugs with promises of fire and blood. Some spat the rancher's old name with venom, a name the boy had never heard. "They'll burn us out," the bride said, standing on the porch with a rifle against her shoulder. The rancher tightened the straps on his saddle, speaking low. "Then we'll be ready." Her gaze hardened. "You think I'll hide?" He looked at her then, truly looked, and for the first time there was no shadow of doubt. "No, I think you'll fight." The night grew restless. Coyotes cried closer. Hooves sounded in the distance, vanishing before dawn. A fence wire snapped like a shot, echoing through the dark. The boy startled awake in the loft, clutching his blanket. "Papa!" The rancher was already on his feet, revolver in hand, eyes fixed on the window. He held still until the sound faded, then set the gun back on the table. The bride stirred the embers at the hearth, whispering, "They're testing us." The rancher nodded, and learning too little. By morning, the cabin looked different. Windows barred with planks. Buckets of water lined by the porch. Spare cartridges laid out neat on the table. The boy helped in silence, dragging wood, stacking kindling, his small arms straining but never quitting. The rancher ruffled his hair only once, wordless, pride hidden in the shadow of his face. The bride stood at the fence, rifle balanced, her eyes on the ridgeline where riders had shown themselves nights before. She did not blink when a hawk screamed overhead. When the sun bled into evening, the rancher walked the line of the yard, boots crunching dry earth. He paused by the well, staring into its black mouth as though the silence there might speak. The bride joined him, wiping her hands on her skirt. "Why do you stay here, if this land only brings trouble?" He rested a hand on the well stone. "Because it's the only place she ever loved." The bride's breath caught. She did not ask who she was. The grief in his voice told her enough. Inside, the boy sat cross-legged on the floor, listening as his father cleaned the revolver. Each click of the cylinder echoed like church bells in the hush. "Papa," the boy asked, "were you ever afraid?" The rancher looked at him, the lines of his face hard as canyon rock. Then his gaze softened just a little. "Always. But I learned fear don't stop a man. It teaches him where to stand." The boy nodded, clutching the wooden toy horse his mother had left him long ago. By the next dusk, signs were clearer. Boot prints closer. A horse's neigh carried on the wind, too near to be wild. A tree carved with a knife. Mocking words left as a warning. The bride traced the letters with her finger, then spat in the dust. "They want us scared." The rancher studied the mark, his silence sharper than words. He turned, lifted the boy onto his shoulders, and walked back toward the cabin. The bride followed, rifle slung across her back, the setting sun painting the horizon in blood. From the canyon came laughter, faint but cruel, promising a storm that would break soon. And so the night closed around them, the ranch holding its breath. Three souls braced against the dark, knowing dawn would not rise quiet. The fire crackled inside, shadows leaning long, while outside the desert whispered of riders gathering and of justice waiting with a steady hand. The showdown in dust and fire. Torches flared against the dark, their light crawling over the canyon walls. Hoofbeats shook the earth, a dozen riders sweeping down like storm winds, laughter carrying sharp in the night. The boy pressed close to the cabin door, clutching the frame. The bride crouched by the fence, rifle braced against her shoulder, breath slow, steady. The rancher stood in the yard, revolver loose in his hand, hat brim low, boots planted firm. His shadow stretched long across the dirt, unshaken by fire or noise. "Come on out, old man," a voice bellowed from the riders. "She don't belong to you." Another laughed. "Nor to the dirt you call a ranch." The bride answered with thunder. Her first shot cracked the night, a torch dropping from a startled rider's hand. Horses screamed, men cursed, the gang reeling. Then silence, sharp, sudden, cut clean. All eyes fixed on the rancher, who had not moved. He raised his revolver, spinning it once in a motion so fast it gleamed like lightning. Murmurs rippled through the riders. Faces shifted, cruel grins faltering. "God Almighty," one whispered. "It's him." The name spread low, carried by fear. The boy did not know it, but the men did. The lonely rancher, the one they mocked, had once been the fastest draw west of the river. The name they thought buried now stood in flesh before them. The leader snarled, trying to mask fear with rage. "Kill him." The rancher's hand blurred. A shot rang out, and a rider tumbled into the dust before his horse knew it had lost its master. Chaos broke. Gunfire split the night, sparks flying off the cabin walls. The bride fired again, dropping another torch, flames sputtering in the dirt. She moved without flinch, steady as the hawk she had once described, eyes sharp, trigger true. The boy crouched inside, pressing his hands over his ears, but still hearing every scream, every crack, every thud of men meeting earth. The rancher strode forward, each shot deliberate, unhurried, as though time itself bent around his draw. Men who had laughed at him now scrambled, their faces pale, their hands shaking too slow for his iron. The bride shouted, "Left side." He pivoted, fired twice, dropping shadows before they could breach the corral. Smoke clung to the air, mixing with dust, firelight painting everything red and gold. "Fall back," one rider screamed, his courage shattered. But the rancher's voice cut through, low and steady. "Leave one alive to tell it." The bride glanced at him, eyes fierce, understanding the weight in his tone. This was not just about survival. It was about memory. about making sure the desert carried the tale. Another man tried to charge, torch raised high. The bride's rifle barked, flame tumbling to earth before it reached the porch. She breathed hard, sweat cutting lines through the dirt on her face. The last of them faltered, seeing too many of their own fallen, too many shadows rising in the smoke. Horses reared, hooves striking sparks. "Go!" the leader shouted, fear cracking his voice. "Go, damn you!" They fled, the survivors scattering into the canyon, curses lost in the night wind. Only silence remained, silence and the acrid stench of gunpowder, the hiss of dying flames. The boy stepped out slowly, bare feet in the dust. His small hands trembled as he reached for his father's sleeve. The rancher holstered the revolver, smoke still curling from the barrel. His chest rose and fell steady, though his eyes carried the weight of ghosts. The bride lowered her rifle, hands raw from the grip, her breath shaking for the first time. She looked at him, really looked, and knew then what the world had once called him. "You could have killed them all," she whispered. He nodded once. "Would have been easier." The boy's gaze lifted. "Why didn't you, Papa?" The rancher knelt, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. "Because fear lasts longer than death." The words sank deep, heavy as stone. By dawn, the ranch smoldered with smoke and silence. The sheriff rode out from town, his badge tarnished, his eyes avoiding the bodies left cooling in the dust. "You've made a mess," he muttered. The rancher stepped forward, revolver hanging loose at his side. His stare cut colder than any barrel. The sheriff swallowed, turned his horse, and rode back the way he came, leaving nothing behind but hoof prints. That evening, the boys sat on the porch between them, holding each of their hands. The bride's wrists, once scarred by chains, now free. The rancher's hands, once sworn to peace, now stained by fire but steady again. The horizon burned gold as the sun sank. Coyotes cried from far off, but they sounded less near, less cruel. The bride looked down at the boy, then at the man beside her. They'll remember this night. The rancher's eyes stayed on the horizon. That's the point. The old boards of the porch creaked under their weight. The land lay wide and endless before them, scarred but theirs. And somewhere, whispered down the trails, the story was already growing. They laughed when the bride was sold in chains, it said. But they never laughed again, not when the lonely rancher stood, nor when the desert bore witness to love, to fire, and to justice.